Senate Republican Don DeWitte joins us now, a Republican from St. Charles in the western Chicago suburbs, northwestern a little bit there, I think. Good to have you with us.
Thanks, Mark.
You sit on that panel, the Joint Committee of Administrative Rules, and I have to say, if there are any silver linings to the pandemic, and of course we always look for those, one of the silver linings might be the renewed interest in the public in what JCAR is and does.
Sure. So JCAR is a fairly unknown,
powerful.
I'm not sure how powerful it is, Mark, but it's a commission that was established actually when Rod Blagojevich was governor. It was established by then Speaker Mike Madigan in an attempt to put a collar or a leash, if you will, on some of then Governor Blagojevich's overreach, if you will.
Or a rubber stamp on it.
Thank you. But what's interesting about it is, number one, it's bicameral, which means members of both houses. It is bipartisan, with members of both parties. Any decision that JCAR makes requires a 2/3 majority vote. So Chairman Wheeler, Co-Chairman Wheeler from the House, Co-Chairman Bill Cunningham from the Senate, do a great job of maintaining decorum from a bipartisan standpoint, but they're also both committed to making sure that JCAR speaks in one voice. And I think what happened this week was a classic example of how that works.
I want to get into that issue of the school mask rule and the vaccine or testing requirement for the teachers in schools in a minute. Before I do, though, just for people that are new to this process of what JCAR is, basically, if you remember from your government class in high school, the executive branch or the governor's office does things. Sometimes they do so within the law, sometimes they flex outside the law a little bit, and when they do, there's a state agency that actually carries out that function. JCAR is the legislative side, and if there's a question of is this the Department of Education or Public Health acting within or outside the law, they come to JCAR, maybe even before they go to the court, and JCAR, the legislature, says, when we wrote that law, we did mean this, or no, we didn't mean that. Fair?
That's accurate, absolutely.
Okay, so now that we're up to speed on what that all is, the court had already said to Governor Pritzker, your mask mandate in schools is unilateral. It doesn't give the individual student a right to appeal.
Lack of due process.
It's blanket application, and I don't know if the judge included this stage of the pandemic and the public health metrics in her overall calculus, but she did say individuals are afforded that right. Do you think JCAR would have broken with Governor Pritzker if the court ruling had not already occurred?
Well, there have been numerous attempts by the legislative branch of that legislative branch of the three branches of government that you suggested, that have continually attempted to control or leash in the governor's exercising his executive order authority. Most of
from
these
the minority party. The Democrats haven't tried to assert that, have
That's
they?
correct. That's exactly right.
But in this case, they were less neutral and more aggressive in reining him in.
Within the context of JCAR, that's correct.
But they wouldn't have done that if the court hadn't already thrown his rule out.
Well, you have to remember that they have super majorities in both houses.
They do.
I think there are an awful lot of people in the majority in both houses that are counting on the governor for all kinds of support in all kinds of different directions.
So you think they don't want to cross him publicly?
Absolutely not. And I think the reason that JCAR was successful was at this point in the pandemic and mask mandate process, to your point, I think even the Democrats are starting to hear from their constituents in their specific districts that parents, local governments, school districts have just about had enough with the governor's mandate. There are only 2 states left that have a mask mandate in place, and Illinois happens to be one of them.
Well, some of them are in the process of lifting. But okay, do masks work to slow the spread of coronavirus?
I think most people accept the fact that masks do work.
And you think?
Well, my personal position is that I think masks are helpful. However, I believe the decision whether to wear a mask, the decision whether to be vaccinated or be boosted, the problem is people deserve to make that decision themselves. They should not have it mandated, should not have it forced down their throats. Parents need to be making that decision. Local governments like school districts, municipalities need to be making that decision. everyone is tired of one-person dictatorial rule in this state, of having it be the governor's way or the highway. That's why I believe JCAR took the position they took on
I
Tuesday.
understand that. There's a political, philosophical difference between what you shall do and what you should do.
Right.
What the state forces you to do.
Correct.
And what you know to be the right thing. So leaders also lead. Would it be helpful if more Republicans were vocal in saying, do the right thing, get vaccinated, wear a mask? Wouldn't that help us all not only fight on the same team against the virus, but also eradicate the virus quickly to be able to come out from under those rules?
You asked my opinion on the previous question.
Yeah.
I held 3 vaccination clinics in my district because I believe vaccinations are helpful in trying to put an end to the spread of this particular virus. My personal opinion, all of the doctors in my life, I have some pre-existing conditions. All of the doctors in my life have suggested that I get vaccinated and I get boosted at every opportunity. That's what I happen to believe. I have never, and I don't think Republicans have ever espoused that masks are bad, vaccinations are bad, you shouldn't do one or the other.
Your colleague, Senator Darren Bailey, running for governor on that very platform, he says he hasn't been vaccinated, won't be vaccinated, and he's basically said he doesn't think masks works, and at times he said he doesn't think vaccines work. He's railed against vaccines even before the pandemic for the measles vaccine.
Darren Bailey is certainly entitled to his opinion. However,
is that a winning platform?
Well, I'm not sure if it is or not. Darren Bailey's going to have to make that decision, how he chooses to address those issues. I'm telling you, in my district, with my constituents, I have never been an opponent to masks. I've never been an opponent to vaccinations. People need to make that decision themselves, whether they want to wear masks, want to be vaccinated. The mandate that they must do it at the wish of the governor in place is not the argument.
The governor made an interesting argument earlier this week. We asked him this question.
Why don't you trust parents and local school districts to make those decisions for themselves?
The fact is that I trust parents, and what parents and doctors are saying is they want kids and teachers and the community safe. That's what I've been following all along. In fact, listening to the majority of parents, I think you know that a majority of parents in the state of Illinois and across the country believe that we need to keep a mask requirement in schools until it becomes safer.
Even if that's right, there was that recent news poll that said 57% of parents with school-age children support masks in school. Is public opinion alone a green light for an executive power emergency order mandate?
I don't necessarily think so. I think the odds are probably much more even than 57-43, whatever the equation may be. What's important in that discussion, I believe, remains the fact that the decisions to wear a mask or be vaccinated must remain with the local government, and with regards to children, must remain with the parents of those children.
Okay, we're talking about local government, local control. Local governments have been drastically affected and impacted through this pandemic. One of the silver linings is that as the economy shifted from buying services, which are largely untaxed in Illinois, people started buying goods, which are taxed in Illinois. That benefited local governments. The federal government also pumped billions of dollars to local governments in Illinois. And yet, while coffers are rising at local governments, cities and mayors across the state are coming here to Springfield this session and saying, hey, Illinois, pay us more of the sales and income tax through the local government distributive fund. Why now?
Well, they're not asking to be paid more, Mark.
More than what they're currently being paid.
They are asking to be paid what the statutes in this state allow them to receive as a part of the local government distributive fund agreement
Those
that
laws
exists
were
in
written
this
40
state.
or 50 years ago.
That's correct, and that number was established at 10% of the total income and predominantly sales tax revenues that this state collects on behalf of local governments.
But the question is, I mean, if you ask the governor this question, or his office, his budget directors, they're going to say, I mean, my goodness, the feds just gave you money directly. We have brought you in. Local cities and towns can add cannabis tax, can add all kinds. And in the 40 or 50 years since that initial law was written, locals have added a lot of local sales taxes in the middle. So why do they need more?
I think that argument rings hollow. If the governor's going to suggest that municipalities have benefited by the increase in state, federal grants that have come directly to municipalities, the state should be taking the same position based on the billions of dollars that Illinois has received from the federal government.
One-time expenses, don't build a recurring expense.
Precisely.
Yeah.
I think it's hollow for the governor to suggest that they have benefited when the state has taken billions of dollars of federal aid, which has basically done the same thing. There was a $3.9 billion windfall with a B in the 2022 budget that will end June 30th. $3.9 billion in additional income taxes, additional corporate income taxes, because the federal government has dumped so much money into unemployment, into business grants. It's a hollow argument just to suggest that only municipalities have benefited from that infusion of federal funding.
So when we go to the store and we buy something and the state adds its tax, well, then there's this big pool of tax money, and the state used to say 10% of that goes to the city or locality where that item was purchased, correct? And maybe just some of the ones around it. And there's counties that are involved and all that. And then there's also some income tax that somehow gets diverted into that big pot. So there's going to be a fight, it sounds like, this session over how to split up that pot of money. This fight has happened before. I guess I want to know, again, I'm asking the same question from a different way. If I'm a shopper at home or I'm someone who's why do I care if that sales tax goes to my local government, my mayor, my city council, or if it goes to the state? It's gone. It's out of my pocket. What's the difference?
Well, I think the difference is the statutory 10%, which has now been drugged down to 6.5% from governors having swept that LGDF revenue pool over the years. The difference is that money that belongs to the local government is produced in the local government, it's produced in local stores and businesses. That money remains in that local community going to that municipality's coffers.
Well, you might be familiar with the state of Illinois' financial situation. The state is trying to improve its credit rating. The state needs all the revenue it can get if you listen to the credit ratings agencies. Wouldn't this weaken the state's position in trying to improve its credit outlook?
I think the percentage of local government distributive fund revenues that are generated are a drop in the bucket compared to the billions of dollars that this state has received from the federal government in ongoing COVID aid.
But you're
state.
Answering a question I didn't ask. Wouldn't diverting billions of dollars from the state's coffers and giving them to local governments hurt the state's overall credit outlook?
Okay, it's not billions of dollars. The LGDF fund generates a little over $1 billion that is distributed to every municipality within the state. I'm suggesting, and the municipalities are suggesting, that they want that LGDF share of revenues coming to them on an annual basis without having to come down here every spring and fight the governor's office, who continues to dig into their portion of the sales tax pot to help reinforce the governor's and the state of Illinois' dwindling revenue streams.
Is there a political ideology or philosophy that says local government should be stronger and the state should be receding in its interest? Or I guess, do the two parties have a disagreement that the state should be more powerful than the locals, or the locals should be more powerful than the state?
I don't think that's the argument, Mark. I think the argument is the fact that municipalities count on that LGDF revenue coming into their budgets on an annual basis from the state of Illinois.
And if they don't get it,
If they don't get it, they end up having to make up the difference with local property tax owners.
So you think there could be a direct path to lower property taxes if the state...
Absolutely, absolutely.
Just like education, funding education more, if you give more to the locals, then you might see property taxes go down.
Exactly. As a member of the Property Tax Task Force 2 years ago, I fought for the state to start giving more money to local schools in an attempt to lower people's property taxes, the number one line item on every property owner's tax bill in the state of Illinois.
Very interesting and spirited discussion. I think you can tell from this interview, I challenged you a little bit to learn more about this issue, but I think you can tell where Senator DeWitte will stand and advocate. I think you're on the side of local governments in all this.
Absolutely.
Sounds like that's
I was a mayor for 8 years.
You can count on a mayor to side with the mayors.
Right.